Take a moment. Think about the first thing you do when you wake up. Maybe you reach for your phone. Maybe you check the news. Maybe you scroll past headlines while your coffee is still warm. And sometimes a word appears again and again. Iran. Missiles. Sanctions. Nuclear program. Rising tensions. It feels distant, like a storm somewhere far beyond your horizon. But here's the unsettling truth. The story surrounding Iran is not just about one country. It is about power, about history, about decisions made decades ago that still shape the world today. And some experts believe that if one piece of this story breaks in the wrong way, it could ignite something far larger, a conflict powerful enough to pull major nations into the same battlefield, a war that could reshape the entire world. But to understand how we reached this fragile moment, we need to go back, far back, to a time when Iran looked completely different. In the early 20th century, Iran stood on land that the world desperately wanted, not for its culture, not for its politics, but for something hidden deep beneath the earth. Oil. Black liquid power. Factories ran on it. Ships crossed oceans because of it. Entire empires rose because they controlled it. And Iran possessed one of the largest reserves on earth. At the time, much of this oil was controlled by foreign companies, especially British interests. Pipelines stretched across deserts. Tankers carried crude across oceans. But most of the profit did not stay in Iran. Many Iranians believed their country was being exploited. And eventually, a man stepped forward who wanted to change that. His name was Mohammad Mossadegh. He was Iran's prime minister. And in 1951, he made a decision that shook the world. He nationalized Iran's oil industry. For the first time, Iran claimed control over its own resources. Inside the country, people celebrated. But outside the country, alarm bells rang, because powerful nations feared a dangerous precedent. If Iran could seize control of its oil, what would stop other nations from doing the same? And this is where the story becomes strange. Instead of diplomacy, a secret operation was launched. In 1953, intelligence agencies from the Central Intelligence Agency and Britain's MI6 supported a covert effort to remove Mossadegh from power. Protests erupted, political chaos spread, and eventually the prime minister was overthrown. The monarchy returned stronger than ever. The ruler of Iran, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, known as the Shah, took firm control of the country. At first, the Shah was seen as a modernizer. Cities grew, universities expanded. Oil money fueled rapid development. Western culture flowed into Tehran. Nightclubs opened, skyscrapers rose. Iran began to look like a rising global power. But underneath that progress, something darker was forming. Many Iranians believed their democracy had been stolen. They believed foreign powers had chosen their leader, and the Shah's government became increasingly authoritarian. Opposition voices were silenced. Political critics were arrested. The secret police gained a frightening reputation. Year after year, resentment quietly grew, until finally, it erupted. In 1979, millions of Iranians poured into the streets. Workers, students, clergy, families. They marched against the monarchy, against corruption, against foreign influence. And within months, the Shah's rule collapsed. The world watched in shock, because the revolution didn't simply replace one government with another. It created something entirely new, an Islamic republic, led by a religious leader named Rollah Khomeini.
The political identity of Iran changed overnight, and so did its relationship with the world. Soon after the revolution, one moment pushed tensions into a crisis. Students stormed the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. Diplomats were taken hostage. For 444 days, they were held captive. The crisis dominated global headlines. Angry crowds filled the streets. Flags burned. Chants echoed across the city. The relationship between Iran and the United States shattered. Sanctions followed. Diplomatic ties vanished, and a new era of hostility began. But the Middle East itself was entering a turbulent chapter. Only 1 year after the revolution, another disaster struck. Iran was invaded by its neighbor, Iraq. The leader behind the invasion was Saddam Hussein. He believed Iran's revolution had weakened the country. He believed it was the perfect moment to strike. Instead, the invasion ignited one of the longest and bloodiest conflicts of the 20th century, the Iran-Iraq War. For 8 brutal years, both sides fought across deserts and cities. Trenches, missile strikes, chemical weapons. Hundreds of thousands died. Millions were displaced. Entire towns were destroyed. By the time the war ended in 1988, neither side had truly won. But Iran emerged deeply scarred. Its leaders became even more determined to protect the country from future threats. And that determination shaped many decisions that followed. During the decades after the war, Iran began expanding its influence across the region. It supported armed groups in neighboring countries. It developed missile programs, and it pursued nuclear technology. Officially, Iran insisted its nuclear program was peaceful, designed for energy and scientific research, but many nations were not convinced, especially Israel. For Israeli leaders, the idea of Iran obtaining nuclear weapons felt like an existential threat. The United States also grew increasingly concerned. Sanctions intensified. Financial systems were restricted. Oil exports were targeted. The Iranian economy struggled under immense pressure, but the nuclear program continued. Then, something surprising happened. Years of negotiations produced a historic agreement. In 2015, Iran and several global powers signed the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, often called the Nuclear Deal. Iran agreed to strict limits on its nuclear activities. International inspectors would monitor its facilities. In return, many sanctions would be lifted. For a brief moment, the world believed tensions might finally cool. But peace in geopolitics is often fragile. And then, everything changed again. In 2018, the United States withdrew from the agreement. Sanctions returned. Iran responded by expanding its nuclear activities once more. The delicate balance collapsed, and mistrust deepened. But nuclear tensions are only part of the story. The Middle East is filled with overlapping rivalries. One of Iran's biggest regional competitors is Saudi Arabia. Both countries compete for influence across the region. In places like Yemen, Syria, and Lebanon, their interests often collide through local conflicts and alliances. Each side supports different groups. Each side accuses the other of destabilizing the region, and every conflict adds another layer of tension. Meanwhile, powerful global players watch closely. Russia, China, European nations, the United States, each with their own interests, each with their own alliances, which means that if a major war breaks out, it might not stay local for long, because modern wars rarely stay contained. Missiles cross borders, allies step in, trade routes are threatened, and global economies react instantly. Imagine the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow stretch of water near Iran. Nearly 1/5 of the world's oil passes through it. If that route were blocked during a conflict, energy markets would panic, prices would surge worldwide, Airlines, shipping companies, factories, everyday people thousands of miles away would feel the shock. This is why analysts pay close attention to every escalation, every missile test, every military exercise, every diplomatic breakdown. And history shows how easily small incidents can spiral out of control. A drone shot down, a military commander assassinated, a ship attacked in international waters. Each event increases tension. Each event pushes rivals closer to confrontation. The danger is not only deliberate war, the danger is miscalculation. One misunderstood signal, one decision made too quickly, one retaliation that sparks another, and suddenly a regional conflict begins pulling in global powers. This is why some experts quietly use a phrase that sounds almost impossible: World War III. Not because it is certain, but because the ingredients exist: powerful militaries, advanced weapons, nuclear capabilities, and decades of mistrust. The same ingredients that have ignited global conflicts before. But history teaches something else. Every conflict begins with human choices, leaders making decisions, advisors offering warnings, generals preparing strategies, diplomats searching for compromise. Behind every headline, there are people weighing risks, people deciding how far they're willing to go. And sometimes the fate of millions depends on those decisions. Today, the story of Iran sits at a crossroads. Negotiations still happen behind closed doors, secret meetings, back-channel diplomacy, careful attempts to avoid catastrophe. Because even the most powerful nations understand something terrifying. Modern war would not look like the wars of the past. Cities are larger, weapons are stronger, economies are more connected than ever. A single regional war could send shockwaves across the entire planet. And yet, life continues. People wake up, check their phones, scroll past the headlines, because the crisis still feels far away. But history has a strange way of turning distant events into global turning points. The World War I began with a single assassination. The World War II began with a single invasion. Small sparks that ignited enormous fires. Which is why the story of Iran matters far beyond its borders, because it reminds us how fragile peace can be, how easily fear can grow, and how quickly rivalries can spiral beyond control. But the future is not written yet. History is not a machine that cannot be stopped. It is a chain of decisions, a series of choices made by human beings, choices that can lead toward confrontation or toward understanding, toward escalation or toward restraint. So the next time you see a headline about Iran, pause for a moment, because behind that single word is a story more complex than it first appears. A story of oil, of revolutions, of wars, of alliances and betrayals. A story that has been unfolding for more than 70 years, and a story that still has no clear ending. Because in the end, the most dangerous weapons in history have never been missiles or bombs. They have always been something quieter: fear, suspicion, pride, and the belief that the other side cannot be trusted. But the most powerful force in history has always been something else: the moment when humans decide to step back from the edge, before the spark becomes a fire, before the fire becomes a war, before the war becomes a story the next generation wishes had never been written.